It's 6 p.m. on Tuesday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. Ahead of a summit between the United States and China, Washington says the two countries are united in their goal of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. And the foreign ministers of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan are set to meet next week in New York to counter any potential threats coming from Pyongyang. Plus, Korea's traditional growth engine exports are losing steam, with financial institutions expecting outbound shipments to drop around 5% this year from 2014. Xi Jinping arrives in the United States on Tuesday for his first state visit as China's president. He begins his week-long trip in Seattle, where he'll meet with American business leaders. On Wednesday, President Xi will attend the U.S.-China Internet Industry Forum on the Microsoft campus, accompanied by 15 business leaders from China. The list includes executives from companies such as Alibaba Group and Baidu, whose combined total market value accounts for 1/8 of China's total GDP. The move is largely seen as an attempt to soothe tensions with the U.S. before he meets with President Barack Obama on Friday. The U.S. president is expected to raise sensitive issues like China's militarization of the South China Sea and its alleged cyber attacks on the U.S. And ahead of the U.S.-China summit, Washington has made it clear that the two countries are united in their opposition to North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Here's our Han Da-eun with more.
U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice says neither the United States nor China will accept North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. Speaking to students at George Washington University on Monday, Rice also reiterated that North Korea should stop developing weapons of mass destruction. She said the weapons threaten regional stability and the respective national security interests of the U.S. and China.
China and the United States are equally united in demanding the complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We firmly oppose North Korea's efforts to develop nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles.
Calling China a fulcrum of influence for North Korea, Rice indirectly called on Beijing to play a more active role in steering Pyongyang away from its two-track development policy of nuclear weapons and the economy.
And this week's meetings between President Obama and President Xi will be another opportunity to discuss how we can sharpen Pyongyang's choices between having nuclear weapons and developing economically.
Such remarks are garnering extra attention as they suggest Obama and Xi will send a strong message to North Korea, specifically urging it to give up its two-track development policy. And as China's North Korea policy has grown more ambiguous since Kim Jongun came to power, watchers say it'll be interesting to see how far China is willing to go to rein in its longtime ally. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is revamping Pyongyang's weapons development program, replacing older officials while giving prominent positions to younger officers. Our Son Jung-in, Song Ji-sun reports.
At a time when North Korea appears to be developing more high-tech missiles and nuclear weapons, it seems like its leader Kim Jong-un is replacing more older officials with officials who are younger by at least a decade or more. The North State Korean Central News Agency reported Tuesday on the officials who accompanied the young leader during a recent visit to a munitions factory. That list includes Kim Chuseok, and his name appeared after those of Workers' Party secretaries Choi Dong-hae and Kim Yang-gon. The location of his name is an indication of his growing power. Although the report did not state the new official's position, there is speculation that he is the Deputy Minister of Machinery, widely believed to be a euphemism for weapons development. Kim was promoted to North National Defense Commission earlier this year and has seen his career take off since Kim Jong-un took power in 2011. Before that, he was a regional official in charge of a military weapons factory complex. He is believed to be in his late 50s, whereas his predecessor was in his 70s. And he's just one of the many new key aides who have replaced older officials in recent months. Experts say the shift in the weaponry sector to a younger group of officials will continue to meet Kim Jong-un's goal of expediting and reinforcing long-range missile and nuclear weapons development. 송지선, Arirang News.
Despite a landmark inter-Korean agreement last month to expand civilian exchanges, Pyongyang appears reluctant to turn those words into action. A civic group in Seoul said Tuesday that its counterpart in Pyongyang sent a letter saying it cannot participate in a joint celebration of National Foundation Day on October 3rd that the two groups had been working on together. The Pyongyang group said it's busy focusing on preparations for the 70th anniversary of the founding of its ruling Workers' Party, which falls on October 10th. The last joint celebration held by the two Koreas was in 2005. North Korea's human rights record was in focus again on Monday at a panel discussion hosted by the UN Human Rights Council. Participants said the international community should work together to address the dire situation and hold accountable those responsible for human rights abuses. Son Jung-in has more.
At a panel discussion in Geneva on Monday, the UN Commission of Inquiry said it had regularly reported and adopted resolutions against North Korea for its crimes against humanity, but has yet to see any progress on the issue. The Commission's chairman said it was the obligation of the international community to investigate matters properly to help improve the country's dire human rights situation.
Crimes against humanity have been found, and it is not open to the world community to turn away. It is the duty of the world community.
Marzuki Darusman, the UN Special Rapporteur on the North, called for the establishment of a system that ensures those responsible for crimes against human rights are held accountable. That could include possible referral to the International Criminal Court. Contributors from other countries, including the US, Japan, and China, all said it was vital the situation in the North be solved immediately. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed concern, but said the inter-Korean agreement reached last month had raised hopes for progress on some matters, particularly reunions for war-separated families. North Korean officials refused to take part in the discussion. In a separate news conference, they said the meeting had ill-minded political objectives and was the product of a U.S.-led conspiracy. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
The foreign ministers of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will meet next week to discuss enhanced cooperation in bringing about peace on the Korean peninsula. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday that Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will hold trilateral talks with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts John Kerry and Fumio Kishida next Tuesday in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Together, they will seek to assess the current situation on the peninsula and discuss North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Japan and the United States will hold separate talks to follow up on a new security agreement reached in April. But whether Korea and Japan will meet to resolve outstanding issues, including Japan's stance on its wartime sexual slavery system, has not yet been confirmed. The Korean Air Force's main fighter jet will get an upgrade to its long-range strike capabilities next year. The Air Force headquarters said Tuesday during a parliamentary audit session. It plans to fit its fleet of KF-16s with an Israeli-made precision-guided munition called the Spice 2000. The device can guide a missile up to 50 kilometers after it's launched into enemy territory. An Air Force official said the system will improve the jet's survivability and increase its long-range strike capability. Korea signed a deal last November for the system, which is scheduled to be imported in the first half of next year. Korea's rival parties continue to wrangle over reforms to the country's labor market. The ruling Saenuri Party vowed to make headway, while the opposition resisted, criticizing the government's labor reform drive as flawed. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party vowed to push ahead with a set of proposals to reform the country's labor market, which is President Park Geun-hye's stated priority for the second half of the year.
Labour reform is a must in order to revive the economy and create jobs for young people. Our party, the government and the presidential office will cooperate on administrative procedures to revise employment rules and contracts. We hope to make the process more transparent by getting help from experts.
The ruling bloc last week submitted proposed revisions to 5 labor laws that aim to ease the requirements for laying off underperforming workers, establish a wage peak system that gradually cuts senior workers' wages, extend the employment period of temporary workers from 2 years to 4, and expand the coverage for accidents that happen during a worker's commute. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has major objections to the proposed reforms, which the party says will only hinder efforts to create stable jobs.
Making it easier to dismiss underperforming workers, cutting wages, expanding the employment period of temporary workers, these are the labor reforms President Park Geun-hye and the ruling party are focusing on. The 5 bills the Saenuri Party submitted on restructuring the labor market are flawed.
The opposition bloc also reiterated that it is against any move by the ruling party, which has a majority in parliament, to unilaterally enact the labor reform bills. The MPAD is calling for a separate parliamentary committee to handle labor reform policy and generate more discussion among various interest groups. The Saenuri Party, however, contends there has been enough discussion and is urging the MPAD to pass the bills. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
News about Korea's slowing exports is not anything new, but the situation may be worse than expected. Local economic institutes are predicting the export decline rate will hit levels not seen since the global financial crisis. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Korea is expecting its worst report card for exports since the 2008 global financial crisis. Local research institutes are predicting Korea's outbound shipments will plunge between 4% and 6% this year compared to a year ago. If their predictions come true, it would mark Korea's worst performance since the aftermath of the global financial crisis, when exports tumbled 14% from the year before. Korea's exports have already been on a downward trend this year, and the figures are expected to slide even more down the road. In August, outbound shipments fell nearly 15% from the year before, the biggest rate of decline in 6 years. Things aren't expected to get any better in September, as the export figure for the first 20 days of the month is already down more than 6% from the previous year. The weak performance is attributed to slow growth in the overall global economy, especially the slowdown in China, Korea's main trading partner. Barclays predicts Beijing will only grow 6% next year, down from 6.6% this year, while others are also revising down their outlooks to the 5% range.
Korea's exports to China haven't been doing so well, as there's less demand for imported goods. Things aren't going to get better in the second half, because there won't be a big enough turnaround in the global economy to boost exports.
Analysts say Korean exporters are still feeling the blow from China's currency devaluation last month, and the nation's petrochemical industries are still suffering from the effect of low global oil prices. They say although there is no immediate remedy for the problem, the government needs to do more to minimize the effects for local exporters. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
With Chuseok, a major Korean national holiday just around the corner, Koreans are bracing for the traffic jams they're almost sure to encounter as they make the requisite journeys back to their hometowns. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport is predicting that roughly 30 million people will travel around the country this year, resulting in 2 more hours of slow traffic than last year. That means it'll take about 7.5 hours to get from Seoul to Busan, usually a 4-hour drive. For those planning to travel by car, the longest travel times for getting out of Seoul will be on the morning of Saturday the 26th. The longest travel times for those heading back into the city will be the next day on Chuseok afternoon, with nearly 7.6 million people expected to be on the road. For those staying in Seoul, public transportation services will be expanded. City bus and subway services will operate on extended hours until 2 a.m. on Sunday and Monday.
That's 2 hours later than normal. More taxis and late-night buses will also be running during this period, and express and inner-city buses will run more frequently as well. 이지원, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.